Have you ever looked at a rental property, run the numbers, but something just doesn't seem right? Something seems a little off. You just can't put your finger on it. Well, after investing for almost 20 years in single family homes, I've come up with some clues that I always pay attention to now, even if the numbers make sense. So in today's video, I thought it would be fun. I'm actually excited to do this video. It's kind of a little different than what I normally do. We're not going to be talking about numbers or anything like that. We're going to be talking about those sight unseen, sometimes seen things that I find either add to my rental property purchase or where I'm like, you know what? I got to pass here. So walk with me as we go through what those steps are. Now, first off, it's always about the numbers. Okay, that's the very first thing. We talk about due diligence and all of that kind of stuff. So the first thing is about the numbers. So I always use my comps at the sales, make sure I'm not overpaying for a property, figure out what the ARV is. And then number two, I'm going to put all that information into my analyzer spreadsheet to make sure that the carrying cost, the holding cost, what the monthly rent's going to be. Those are the things that I want to know first. Is it an appreciating area? So all of the things that I've been talking about, yes, I'm going to do all of those very first thing. Let's talk about driving the neighborhood. Now, one of my favorite marketing techniques to find off-market properties is driving for dollars. So sometimes I do have this information before I actually even talk to a seller. So driving for dollars, what I'm looking for is distressed properties. And it's more than just overgrown weeds. It could be clutter in the backyard. One of my top clues that it's a distressed property is broken blinds in the front windows, dented garages. I normally drive the neighborhood during the daytime. But if I'm actually looking to purchase the property, I will also drive it during other hours, like nighttime. Now, don't go over there at midnight. That's just too weird, right? I want to get a sense of what, especially if I'm holding it, I want to get a sense of what the neighborhood's like. I want to get a sense of if it's a safe neighborhood. So say I'm going to be flipping that property. Will I feel comfortable leaving my tools there? I mean, I've known investors where they are flipping a property and not only did their tools get stolen, but appliances got stolen. Sometimes you can tell about a neighborhood and what security measures you may have to take. Let's say there's bars on the window. I also look for vacant properties. If there's a lot of vacant properties in the neighborhood or very unkempt block that I'm looking at, or things just look broken into. There's a lot of cars in the driveway or in the yard that are broken down. There's old washing machines. There's old appliances. So you can tell a lot by just driving through the neighborhood. And even if the numbers make sense, would you or would you not purchase that property? So here's an example. We recently just went and looked at a property and it did check most of the boxes, but here's the thing. The house sitting right next door was a complete hoarder mess on the outside of it. And there was no way to shield that from my potential renters. I mean, there was no fence that I could build around this property. So I would always have this eyesore next to the property that I owned, and that's going to affect people when they come to look at it to rent it. Or if I was going to even flip it, a lot of people aren't going to want to buy right next to a hoarder home. And it didn't look like those people were going to be moving anytime soon. So we passed on that house because of that one fact that there was this very telling eyesore next door that I would not be able to change or cover up, or there's no amount of beautifying my property to take away from the eyesore that was sitting next door. So this kind of goes back to clue number 2, pride of ownership. You can be looking at a neighborhood and it looks great. The numbers look great. But if you look around, and again, let me just give you another example. I went to another property. It was actually on the MLS that had been sitting for a very long time. And sometimes this is a clue. I will look at properties that are on the MLS. So we went and looked at the property. And when we drove up, we didn't even go inside. You know why? Because the neighborhood needed to be renovated. And I'm saying that there were junk cars everywhere. It was like someone took this little house and they renovated it, and it was a beautiful little house, but the surrounding neighbors and you would have to renovate the whole block. So when I see properties like that, again, I pass because unless I'm going to go in there and renovate the whole block, I do not want to own a property where I know the neighbors, if you will, are going to affect my property value and or my pool of people who are going to rent that property. So that leads me to clue number 3. What is parked on the street and outside? One of the things I look at is one of the areas that we have here is the Colony. And you can actually get really nice little duplexes over there. But I am careful about which properties I look at because they have very narrow streets. In these duplexes, hardly any of them have garage spaces. So everyone is forced to park on the street. So if you have a line of duplexes on each side of the street, and then you have tenants or homeowners parking in the street, there's about this much room for me to drive through to get down the street. There's not even enough room on some of those streets when there's cars parked on both sides for myself and another car to pass. I stay away from those types of houses as well. There's just too much traffic. And I also put myself in the position of the person who is going to rent the property and just the parking situation. So if we purchase duplexes, I like to own both sides so that I can kind of control when the roof is replaced and things like that. But I also like to have parking garages because I think those rent easier and for higher priced. Now, here's something I've just learned over the years, and you might know this as well, but I look around at what is going to attract people not only to my property, but what amenities is my property going to provide in terms of, is it close to schools? Is it close? Now, I have a tendency not to buy properties that are right across from the school because of just the traffic. But when you're buying single family homes, generally, if you use my buy box of 3-bedroom, 2-bath, you're going to be renting to families that have children. So typically, families, even when they rent, they want to be close to schools. They want to be in a good school district. So I do run reports about the schools and the schools in that area. There's different ratings. And so I can run reports to say this is an A school, this is an F school. And so does it always affect my purchase decision? Not always, but it's kind of good to know, like, oh, this school has B rating or this school is known for this or whatever it is. So those are the things that I look for. That's just one aspect. And one thing that I kind of picked up over the years is if I purchase, now I don't just go out and look for properties that are near firehouses, but in the past, when I have purchased a house, a single family rental, and then I went to go get insurance for that house, you know what I found out is sometimes I get a discount depending on how close the rental property is to the firehouse. So the first time it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, it was in Wiley, Texas, and my rental property happened to be about a half a mile from the firehouse. So I got a significant discount on my insurance premium just because of the location of where the property was. So that's just something that I've kind of learned over the years. If it's close to a hospital, a firehouse, what I have found over the last 20 years is if I have properties that are within a mile or two of that location of a firehouse or a hospital, guess what? When there's electrical outages, what I've noticed is either one, my property was not affected, or number two, it was not affected for as long as maybe somebody else. I personally live very close to a firehouse, and when we had a big ice storm a few years back, our house lost power for a little bit, but not for days and days and days. And I don't know, I have to kind of suspect that since I live close to a firehouse that, maybe that kind of sways the electrical grid, or because, those are needed services. So again, I don't have anything to back it up, but if you have experience with that, drop your comments below. So that's just kind of an added bonus that I look for. If I can find a property that's within a mile radius of a hospital and or a firehouse. Now, here's another clue. And this one doesn't really matter when you go by the house, but you want to listen for what are the sounds that you're hearing. So a few years back, my husband and I went to a house and we were thinking of buying this house. It was in Dallas and it was a beautiful home, freshly renovated, huge backyard, had so many potentials to be a short-term rental. We would just have to walk in and start scheduling people, start booking people to be in this property. It was beautiful. But I wondered why it was sitting on the market for so long because we were going to be able to get this at a discount. So we went outside, and the reason that I am concluding that it didn't sell was because of the traffic. This property sat on the corner, which I do love corner properties, of a very, very busy street. And it wasn't even a highway. It's just a very major thoroughfare in the DFW area with a stoplight on one side of the house. And I mean, just the traffic. And we were there about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And I mean, it was just nonstop with the cars. So we were saying to ourselves, well, what could we do? It had a huge, I think it was like almost a 10-foot wood fence around the property. So we were wondering, what could we do to minimize the noise? When you went into the house, the main bedroom, the master bedroom was on the side of the house nearest the road noise. And we could have spent a lot of money soundproofing the house, soundproofing the windows. But when you go outside, and we thought about putting fountains in, so we passed on the house because of the noise level. Because here's what we thought. Okay, the house is beautiful. People are going to walk in. They're going to love it. But the first time they don't get a good night's sleep because of the noise, they're going to write a review about that. And so we passed on that property, although it was a very, very nice property. But the reason we were purchasing it was for a short-term rental. It wouldn't make a good long-term rental, but it was a good short-term rental. So we passed just because of the noise level, and it was going to be too costly to muffle the house. Another property that we looked at, it was great, but the drawback was it was right next to railroad tracks. And here was my thinking. This is how I think about it. I think about, okay, I could make money on this property, but what if something happens? These are my thought processes. So with this property, the backyard did have a fence around it, but the front yard did not. The way that the train track was, it was a cul-de-sac, and then at the end of the cul-de-sac was a little berm, a little hill, and then the railroad tracks sat on top of that. And my thought was, what if the family had little kids and the little kids went out there and accident? We actually went back just to see how loud the train passing was, because there was no barrier between the house and the train tracks. So yes, it was very loud, and it was not Amtrak quiet. It was a freight car. The loudness was based on freight cars going by. So again, the house checked all of the boxes. I mean, it was actually going to be a good rental property, but for that one fact. And again, that was my personal decision to say, you know what? I don't want to own a property right next to the train tracks. So here's another thing. That property had been for sale, and it was sitting on the market. And again, beautiful home. But we always talk about location. That doesn't necessarily mean, okay, in this city or in this suburb or in this HOA. It means what is around. So when you have a train track right next to a house with it was not even a quarter mile from the house. It was very, very close. I was even surprised the builders built the house that close to the train tracks, or the train tracks went in after. I'm not sure which one went first, but we passed simply because of the train tracks. Because again, I had to think of resale value, and here's a house. It had already been on the market for over 6 months. And my guess is that it wasn't selling because of the train tracks. The other thing I like to check out when I'm driving through the neighborhood or when I'm doing my inspections, and I'll go to the property during my due diligence / option period. And I'm just looking at, are the neighbors outside? And if they are, I'll even go and chat with them about the neighborhood and, what they like about it. I'm trying to find out the feel, the vibe of the neighborhood. And if it's family oriented, single people, age, it makes a big difference when you're buying investment properties, and especially when you're doing buy and hold. Normally for me, I have a target market in mind. I like to rent to families. So I usually buy houses that are 3 or 4 bedrooms. I'll just kind of check out the neighborhood and see how people are taking care of their yards, especially if it's in an HOA. And I might even talk to them about how's the HOA. I'll look at the amenities if there are any. So again, just getting the vibe of the neighborhood. And it doesn't mean I put a lot of heavy weight on whether I'm going to buy an investment property based on that, but it does give me kind of, as I'm going into the investing side of it, okay, this is probably the type of tenant I'm going to attract. And one of my clues you might be shocked at, because I have talked before that I don't get into speculation I'm a pretty cut and dry person. Like, the numbers make sense. I know I'm going to get appreciation, but the future matters. The future matters when I'm looking at investment properties. I tend to shy away from rental properties where there is open land behind or around the investment property. So I've worked with different clients over the years, and I give them this reasoning for it. And then it's up to them whether they want to abide by it. So when you're looking at properties, especially if they're in newer neighborhoods, and there's a lot of vacant land behind the development, and it's zoned today for residential, but you know what? That can change over time. So that can then be zoned for commercial. So because I don't know what the future is going to hold, what I'm always thinking of in the future is that I need to buy a property that I can sell or own or finance in the future. That's what I'm looking at. What is my exit strategy in the future? So if I'm looking at a property and I can see it's a new build community, I can see that there's all these tracts of land and where they're going to be buying houses. But then I see right behind where I'm purchasing, there's a lot of vacant land, and the builder might tell me, oh, it's going to be residential. But what happens is those residential neighborhoods go up, and then developers see opportunity and they rezone it, which can happen. They just have to go to the city council and get it rezoned. They get it rezoned for commercial. And the next thing you know, you're living behind a strip mall. And think about this. If they have a strip mall, they're going to have big lights to light it up at night. And there's going to be a parking lot and there's going to be traffic. So now it goes back to, well, what is going to be in there in the future? So that's why I stay away from properties where there's a lot of vacant land. So when I put all of these together, I look at, just like I said in the beginning, what I focus on first is the numbers, because if the numbers don't make sense, it doesn't matter what I see in the neighborhood or what people say about it. But then after I do that, and now I do all of this through my option period as I'm looking around. I'm not waiting before I negotiate with the seller. I'm doing this all concurrently with getting the property under contract, negotiating the price. But what I'm looking at is what I would say the positive and negative of having a property in that particular neighborhood. I do want to hear from people what they have to say, the neighbors, or even the seller. Sometimes the seller is a good source of information, especially if there's an HOA. So you just want to make sure that these clues become part of your due diligence. It doesn't mean that you're going to buy or not buy the property because of them, but you may have an idea later on as you're trying to exit the property, what things might prevent you from selling the house or renting it long term. So if there's eyesores, what can you do about that, if anything? If there's a firehouse, a lot of people like to live close to the firehouse. And again, I don't have any data to back it up, but from my experience, it does seem that if you have a house close to a hospital or firehouse, you have less likelihood of extended outages. So I just like that little fact. And it seems like I got a discount on my insurance. So as you learn investing techniques, you're not going to just learn how to analyze a property. You're going to learn all of these little subtle techniques about, is this going to be a good rental property, a good buy and hold property? And some of these things you can apply to flip properties as well. So again, if you're purchasing a home and you forecast that you're going to make $50, $60, $70, $100,000 on the flip, but you neglected to take into account that there is a hoarder home on the right and a hoarder home on the left, and across the street, there's a yard full of cars. You just have to think about what is the exit strategy, and are these clues that we talked about, are they in any way going to affect the way you can exit the property? When you find a property, the next thing you'll want to do is analyze it. To help you with the number part, we have our How to Analyze a Rental Property in our resource center. The link is below. I also want to say that these clues that I've talked about, again, don't necessarily mean you should or shouldn't buy the property. They should just be taken into consideration, because are they going to impact who you're renting to and your exit strategy?